Hi yogis! This is going to be a short Yin Yoga practice aimed at targeting the whole body. And we're only going to hold the poses for about a minute or two in this practice. In Yin we can hold the poses far longer than that, so 5-10 minutes even. This practice will be suitable for all levels. You don't need any props, but if you have got a cushion or some yoga blocks handy, then go ahead and grab them. And we're going to start today in Child's Pose. So go ahead and bring your big toes to touch. Take the knees out just as wide as feels comfortable, so a little wider than the hips, or maybe for you today bringing them a little bit closer will feel better on the low back. So find the place that feels right for you. Remember, this is your practice, so do what feels good here. And then bringing the head down towards the mat. And if the mat feels like it's a little far away, just bring your block or cushion underneath your head here. I'm going to give you a few variations as we move through our practice. And then settling in here, breathe in steadily. Bring the attention to the breath where you feel it entering in through the nose. Guiding the breath gently all the way down to the belly. And in our child's pose, even feeling the low back start to expand with each inhale. And with each exhale, softening even more, sinking into the pose. And we're going to use our breath as a guide throughout our practice today. That soft, steady breath. Keeping the focus on the exhale, where the body can relax that little bit more, supporting our nervous system. I'm just taking about 5 more breaths here. Maybe reaching the fingertips a little bit further forwards if you've got a little bit more space as the body starts to open up. And then taking your last breath in here, so at your own time, inhaling deeply. Fill the ribs in all directions. And then go ahead and sigh it gently out of the mouth. And then just walking the fingertips back towards the hips, bringing the torso back upright. Now we're going to move into Toes Pose. So bringing the toes onto the mat and spreading them wide so there's a little bit of space in between each toe. Make sure that little toe is out there as well. And then sitting back so that the shoulders are stacked above the hips. If this feels a little bit too intense, you can come up a little bit higher. You can roll a blanket or even just put a cushion behind the thighs to take a little bit of pressure off the toes. And while we're here in our Toes Pose, we're going to work into the arms a little bit too. So taking the arms out nice and wide, and then give yourself a big hug, bringing the right arm underneath. Now you can stay here, stretching out through the back, the shoulders, or maybe bring the forearms towards each other into our eagle arms, either wrapping once or wrapping twice. Wherever you are. We're just working towards the edge of our stretch, so we don't want to go to the place where we're straining and causing tension. We always want to find that place where the body can relax and start to open up in its own time. And just taking a few more breaths with our arms on this side. Maybe even closing the eyes here. Relaxing the shoulders away from the ears. And for our last 2 breaths, just lowering the chin down. Maybe noticing where the stretch, the stress changes in the body. And then inhaling deeply. And sighing it out. Stay with it with the toes if you're still in toes pose. If not, you can bring the tops of the feet flat to the mat. Otherwise, with the toes still tucked, go ahead and bring the left arm underneath. So taking the arms out wide, bringing the left arm under. Staying here if that feels right for you today. Or bringing the backs of the arms towards each other. Maybe taking the wrap so that the palms come towards each other too. And then just softening through the shoulders. Keep the chin drawn in slightly so the back of the neck's nice and long. In our yin practice, we're working with these connective tissues in the body, so the fascia, rather than the muscles. And this is the reason why we don't want to go to the point where we feel strain. So we just want to go to the first point of stretch, and that place where the body can just relax. And that's the point where the fascia will start to open up and expand. And then in turn, that will put stress or strain onto the joints, and over time, it will make it stronger. And just a few more breaths here. And taking a big breath in. And sighing it out. And release the arms. Just shift the weight forward slightly so that you can release the toes and bring the tops of the feet down to the mat. And just very briefly here, either stay in here if this feels like enough of a counter stretch, or lifting up the knees, maybe one at a time, maybe both together. And just notice how you're feeling just after these few simple movements to start our practice. Okay, so we're going to open up the hips a little bit and we're going to come into our Yogi Squat. So bringing the feet a little bit wider than the hips. So the toes turn out at an angle, so at the diagonal, and then sinking the hips down. So options here, you can place a block, a blanket underneath your hips, just to make it even more restful, allowing the body to just open up without the muscles having to engage. Palms of the hands can come together, aiming to get the thumbs towards that heart center, lifting tall through the crown of the head, and then finding some softness here. And we're just here for 2 minutes. Gazing down, keeping the chin tucked just slightly. Find that soft focal point, our dristi, our gaze, keeping us centered in our practice. For our last minute here, just ask yourself, where can I let go? Where can I do a little bit less? Maybe it's the muscles in the face, around the jaw, the shoulders. And then go into our last few breaths. When you're ready, inhaling deeply and sigh it out gently. So to release from our Yogi Squat, our Malasana, just release the hands, bring the fingertips down to the ground, and we're just going to raise the hips up. Keep a big bend in the knees here, but bring the toes so they're facing forwards and the feet are parallel to the edge of the mat. You can go ahead and move your blocks out of the way. And then almost resting the torso down on the thighs here. You can just let the arms dangle, or maybe hold in opposite elbows here, whatever feels good. But we're aiming here to feel the strain, so the stress, through the back, so through the spine. And when I say strain and stress, it's because we're not stretching. When we stretch a muscle. And the word strain is what we use when we're talking about the fascia, the connective tissues. But it shouldn't feel like a strain, any kind of effort. So we're going for minimal effort here. Let the breathing be soft. And just 5 more steady breaths here. Maybe noticing where the stress changes. Where do you feel sensation shifting around the body? And then taking your last deep breath in here. And exhale, sigh it out. Bring the fingertips down to the mat. And then go ahead and bring the shins down. So we're coming into a tabletop position just briefly here. Maybe shifting the hips side to side, or even making some little circles with the hips. Just finding a little bit of movement. And even taking some cat-cows here. So inhaling, dropping the belly, letting the shoulder blades slide down and together. And exhaling, draw the belly button in. Push the ground away as the shoulder blades separate. Looking back to the thighs. And then our next pose we're coming into is our Peppy Pose. So from this position, you're going to take your knees all the way back so that you've got more space in front of you here to reach the arms forwards and a little bit wider than shoulder width apart. And then go ahead and bring the forehead down to the mat. And again, if the mat's a little bit far away or the floor's a bit far away, you can pop your head on a block here. Just make sure the back of the neck is nice and long. So a big opening through the shoulders, the chest. Just gently drawing the low belly in here to protect the low back. And if you're very open through the chest and the shoulders, maybe you can even bring the chin or the chest down to the mat. But remember, we're just working towards this first sensation of stretch. And then holding in stillness, allowing the body to relax and open up at its own time. Just about 5 more breaths here. Again, asking yourself, where can I let go? Where can I do that little bit less? And then on your next inhale, filling all the way up. And sigh it out. And we're going to transition here nice and slowly down onto our bellies. And we're going to come into our Sphinx Pose. So lowering the hips down to the ground. Go ahead and stretch those legs out long behind you. And bring the elbows underneath the shoulders. And the palms can be down or maybe facing up, whatever feels more comfortable for you here. So we want to be somewhere where we can let the collarbones be broad and feel that sensation in the upper back. So we don't want to feel anything in the low back here. So it might mean for you just keeping that gentle pressure of the hips pressing down into the mat to make sure the low back's protected. And then finding softness wherever you can. Gazing down so the back of the neck is long. And with each inhale, feel the body expand. And with each exhale, feel it soften. And taking our last few breaths here. And then when you're ready, inhale in deeply. And sighing out. And just go ahead and lower the torso down. Make a little pillow with the hands here. And either rest the forehead or the cheek on the hands. And again, just notice any sensations in the body. And noticing any thoughts, emotions that might have arisen so far in our practice. And we notice without any judgment. Just acknowledging what's going on for us today. And whatever that may be, knowing that it's all okay. And then when you're ready, bringing the hands under the shoulders, pressing yourself up through a tabletop. And we're going to come all the way down to seated and work a little bit more into the hips. So go ahead and bring the soles of the feet together. And you might want to bring something under your hips here. So you can bring a block or a cushion underneath you. Just raising the hips that little bit to allow the pelvis to tilt forwards so that we can open up through the inner thigh. And find that nice curve in the low back, so a long spine here. So sitting up nice and tall, reach through the crown of the head. And this might be enough, so maybe you stay here. If you've got a little bit more space, a little bit more movement available to you, then reach tall one more time on the inhale. And then as you exhale, coming forwards from the hips with a straight back. And the hands can just rest near the feet, maybe on the thighs or the calves, whatever feels best. When you can't come forwards anymore with the straight back, then just dip in the chin and gently allowing the spine to flex. And breathing through the whole length of the spine here. Letting the belly be soft as you inhale. And taking about 5 more breaths here. ready, inhaling deeply. And sighing out. And use the hands to support yourself here as you bring the torso back upright. Just noticing any little sensations as you go. And then just to release from this pose, bring the feet out in front of you. You can stay sitting on your block or cushion, or you can move it out of the way and bring the hands behind you. And just let the knees rock from one side over to the other side. Feeling into the hips, the glutes. Noticing what's going on there today. So we're going to take one more big hip opener from here, and it's our straddle pose. So again, sitting on the block if that feels more comfortable for you. Letting the pelvis roll forwards. And then we're not going to take the widest version of our straddle here, so just come to a position that feels comfortable. And let the thighs roll out. And then sit nice and tall. Inhaling. Maybe staying here, or maybe walking the fingertips forwards a little bit with a nice long spine. And then when you can't go any further, you can dip the chin, start to soften through the upper back. Just resting the hands wherever it feels comfortable. If you've got some cushions, blocks or blankets handy, this is a nice place for them here. Maybe even resting the head down. And relaxing through all the muscles in the legs, the feet, the ankles. And it's totally fine here to keep a little bend in the knees. In fact, it might be better to do that just to protect the hamstrings that little bit. So remember, we're not going for our deepest stretch. We just want that little bit of sensation. Maybe you feel it in the back of the thighs, or maybe more in the inner thigh, even behind the knees. Everyone's body is different. We'll all feel this slightly different way. And coming into our last few breaths here. And on your next inhale, filling all the way up. And sighing out. And then using the hands to support the torso one more time as we come back upright. Moving your blocks out of the way, cushions, whatever you had in front of you. And then bringing the hands behind the knees one at a time, bringing them back in to find these windscreen wipers. Again, leaning back slightly to support yourself with your hands. And then from here, we're going to make our way down onto our backs. So go ahead and lie down. Keep your props handy, so if you've got some cushions handy, and keep them nearby. And we're just going to come into a little twist here. So first, bringing the shoulder blades underneath you. And then draw the knees in one at a time. And just give yourself a little hug here. Just a little counter pose from these hip stretches. And then releasing the feet back down onto the ground. Press firmly into the feet, lift the hips just a couple of inches and slide the hips slightly to the left. And then from here, just let the knees come on over to the right. And lengthening down through this left hip to your top hip, increasing the space between the hip and the left shoulder. And your left arm can come into this cactus position, or maybe straighten it out in a T. And the right arm can either encourage this hip to melt down further away from the upper body, or you can come out to the side, maybe bending the elbow, gazing either up at the ceiling or away in the opposite direction to the knees. Whatever feels good here. And if you notice your breathing becomes a little shallower here, that's completely normal. It might mean that you've gone a little bit too far into your pose. So you could bring your block underneath your knees just to raise the knees up a little bit and reducing that twist through the spine. And then inhaling deeply here. Sighing out. And coming back through centre. And again, pressing firmly down into the feet, bringing the hands either side of the hips. And lifting the hips, sliding them over to the right. And letting the knees come to the left. And again, we can lengthen the hip down away from the shoulder with the left hand. Or we can take both arms out to the side, out long like a T or bent like a cactus. Back of the neck nice and long. And just melting down into the ground here. We're not here too long. And then when you're ready, inhaling deeply and sigh out. Just drawing that belly button in slightly as we come back through centre. And then setting up for our final relaxation, our Shavasana Pose. I'm going to give you some options here. So from lying on your back, you can bring the feet down to the floor and let the knees come together. Resting here in constructive rest pose. Or you can bring the legs out long, feet a little bit wider than the hips. Hands can rest on the belly or out at the sides. Wherever you are, just bring those shoulder blades underneath you. Make sure the back of the neck is nice and long. And if this is a little much on the low back, you can either take that constructive rest pose with the knees bent and the feet on the floor, or you could roll a blanket and place it underneath the back of the knees. And that just takes a little bit of the curve out of the low back. And wherever you are, just taking these few moments in silence, allowing the body to absorb the practice so that it can learn from it and grow and become stronger. And if you have the time, please rest in your Shavasana a little bit longer. The longer the better. Otherwise, start to gently bring some life, some movement back into the body. So wiggling the fingers, wiggling the toes. As you inhale, feeling that energy from the breath traveling around into every cell. Gently deepening the breath. With each inhale, becoming slightly more awake. And then when you're ready, bending the knees one at a time. And then rolling onto one side. I'm just pausing here. And taking a moment to acknowledge your practice. Thanking yourself for looking after your body, your joints, and your mind in this way. And slowly pressing your way up to a seat. Sitting in any comfortable position for you, where you can stack the shoulders tall above the hips. Just roll the shoulders back here a couple of times, taking some big, steady breaths. And then bringing the hands to heart center. Thank you for joining me, yogis. I'd love to know what you hear about this practice, so let me know in the comments. And I'll see you next time on the mat. Namaste.